Bernhard Langer has been one of the most amazing, consistent players for 4 decades now, winning majors, European Tour, PGA Tour, Champions Tour to an unbelievable level. But what is it he does to have such longevity in his career, in his swing? I'm going to go through some very simple aspects that I know that you can apply and really reap some reward. One thing I want you to notice is how wide his stance is here. It's not particularly wide. Too many of you do have very wide stances. This allows him to rotate a little bit easier. It helps him stay balanced. It just helps his joints work a little bit better within his parameters. So many of you tend to have this desire to stand a lot wider, especially when it comes to drivers. But even when you've got irons, it's like you're trying to, how can I put it? You're trying to get like closer to the ball. You're trying to squat down to it. You're too bent. The legs get wider, thinking it's going to give you a more stable base. But the problem is, what can happen is it restricts the lower body so much, so we can't turn. And this is essential for another move that he does so very, very well and so very easily. But it's facilitated by the width of his stance. So I want you to just test this out. Okay, stand up, and I want you to approximately make sure that your feet are pretty much in level with your shoulders, okay? Yes, they can go a little bit narrower, they can go a little bit wider, but generally I want you to just have this sort of checkpoint, okay? We are centered, we have a little bit of tilt in our spine, but we want to try and make a narrower stance because that's going to help stay balanced and complete our swing. Just that little bit. Depth, like where his backside goes in comparison to the plants that you see behind. It's not excessive, but it is significant. We want to see the angle that his hips are allowed to sort of pivot on and how much he gets depth. So you can see he's shifting to his trail side, but his backside is just moving backwards slightly. Everything has moved back and up. And by focusing on the leg movement here, with no matter what club, the arms are just following what the rest wants to do. What I'm showing you here is very crucial and very effective to a better consistent swing. Especially as we get older, it's more important to use the larger muscles, to use the legs, to use the ground. It's not so much about trying to put the hands in different places or use speed. It's just using our bigger, larger muscles and the hands coming along, the arms coming along for the ride a little bit more. But it's very important to kind of get it right. And what he does, as you saw, he gets a lot of hip depth, meaning he's not sitting into his heels, but he's able to really sort of sit in to his hips. There's like even a bit more movement going back this way, okay? So he's winding up that way, sitting in to his hips. He's loading into the ground to be able to push in. And the movement is, it's not rotating this way, okay? He's not sitting back on his heels this way. He's allowing this right hip to move up and back. And this is the main generator of his entire backswing. So I want you to grab a stick, a club, or whatever it might be, and just practice some movements where you're shifting, okay? But you're trying to move this up and behind you as much as possible. But make sure that you're not falling into your heels. We are here, there. And you'll notice by doing and focusing on this shift, the rest of my body has to kind of follow. Like I'm here. If I just lift my arms up straight ahead, I'm in a backswing. And all I did was this move. I'm feeling it wind up and fall back in. But we get to that a little bit later. But it's this hip depth that is the real engine to his swing. It takes a lot of pressure off his back and it generates a lot of power and unbelievable consistency well into his 60s. And you can do it too. So practice that movement. Notice I'm not straightening the leg too much. I'm not turning too flat. I'm feeling like I'm sitting into the hip and getting depth, and it stays there as we push through, okay? It's a little bit tricky, and we've got other lessons on it, but notice that about his swing and see if you can apply it to your own. Let's start looking at the way he takes the club back, all right? There's one significant move that he does with his head that allows the facilitation of his turn, but also to not put too much strain on his body. Let's see if you can spot it. It's in the upper body. Can you see it? Look how far over to the side his eyes are pointing over this direction. Well, his eyes are still looking at the ball, but his visor, his head is following his turn. He hasn't got his chin tucked down, and this again is helping a nice smooth rotation without trying to make a huge turn. And you can see the way he's sort of sitting back into his hips here, all right? He's made his rotation, but he shifted and then he sits back into it. But that head rotation helps a load of different things. And let me show you back outside. Your neck to move, and you noticed how much he moved, especially with the driver. He's sitting into it and he's almost looking over here, and he's just looking at the ball out the corner of his eye. And even though that might be a bit tricky to think, well, I'm not really looking at the ball, what it's doing, if you test it out and just have a little swing and allow your chin to sort of face this way, you're able to get sort of behind a lot easier. I'm not talking about making a big turn, but I'm certainly not restricted. It takes away that tendency to pick up, to whip the hands on the inside. It's just sitting into the hip and allowing it to fall into place, okay? So allow that head to turn, and as you move it back, you turn it through. Pretty simple, but just test that out. If you haven't already, check out the links below. It's giving you a free series and free access to our online club. No credit card needed. I just want to show you how much we can help your game with so many different aspects, but simple instruction and community to help you play your best golf. Check it out below. Now we're coming back towards the ball. Obviously he shifts a little bit. He does clear the lower body, but it's not an excessive hard rotation that so many people are telling you to do. He is just unloading his body, using the legs, using the pivot that he's generated, not trying to swing excessively hard or manipulate the club face too much. They are just, again, following along for the ride. Now, the next part I want to show you is, see how his trail foot is not sort of spinning out this way? It's almost a slight movement to pull the trail foot back a little bit, which then in turn allows a little bit more of a natural release here. He has this move that isn't trying to shallow, because so much talk all the time is gotta shallow. But what happens is when you shallow, you get stuck. So what move can we have that just is simple, that is more repeatable to get us back to the ball? Bernhard, what he does, it's almost like a slightly over the top. So he's looking over here, but he throws his hands kind of down that way. It's almost like an over the top move, but he's never getting disconnected. He's not throwing the hands out this way. And a little feeling I would like you to have is actually, you can place a glove, but I like just tucking in your t-shirt a little bit here, just so it's on the left side of your pec, like tuck in your shirt, just to be slightly aware of it, because we want a little bit of connection with this arm that is going to help repetition, okay? It's almost being glued to me. As I swing down, I'm feeling like I'm pinning it just a little bit tighter than when it was here. That move, I'm pinning it inside as I make my way back to the ball, and it stays there. It stays there completely. And the other thing he does, making his way back into the ball, is this trail foot almost has a tendency to draw itself back a little bit, because what that's doing is making sure that he's staying within himself, that he's not lifting up, he's not pushing this way. So that almost drill, and you see Scotty Scheffler do it now, is like this, okay? It's there. But there's one extra move I want to show you that I want you to apply. As we come into impact, you'll see that he's not trying to hold on to this club face. He's allowing the toe end of the club and his arms to release. And this, again, is putting less pressure on his back, on his body, on his arms. He's allowing a very natural movement of his wrists to be able to just release that club with that back of the hand turning over. You can see the toe of the club pointing straight up at this point. And as we get round to here, you can see the iron especially has wrapped all the way over. He is really allowing those wrists to rotate and turn over. With his release, he's not holding the club face off. He's not trying to get extra shaft lean. He's not trying to rotate hard this way. He's just allowing everything to be pulled through. His arms, even though they're sort of connected to his upper chest, they're pretty much just following the ride of his legs and pivot. So from here, what he's feeling is one or two things. One of them is about the club head release, and I'll tell you that in a second. But his only goal is to try and finish in a tall, balanced finish position, basically. Just to try and get to a nice place here, good things have to happen all the way back. Because yes, he used to have a tendency to kind of have this reverse C and put the pressure on his back, but he's not trying to overcompensate and make big hip rotation or anything like this. He's allowing it to go where it wants, but he's not putting pressure on his lower back. He's allowing it to stand tall, okay? There's no pressure here, or very little. And that's key for a lot of you, for longevity. But an extra little zip that he gets to be able to bring that club face in with a little bit of power. As he releases through, I showed you on the swing, on the clip, but I want you to feel like as you're swinging through, I want your back of your hand here to be facing down towards the ground, okay? We're not holding it up this way, and we're not trying to sort of allow the wrist too much to go. We are just allowing this turning movement, okay? So the back of the glove, if I had one on, or the back of the hand, as we sort of enter this release position, it's here. And what that's going to do is give you a confidence and a positive release just to throw the club. We're not trying to manipulate it, but it's giving us that extra little whip through the ball. The body is moving with the hip movement, the pivot and everything, but we're just allowing a little bit of extra zip here so we can accelerate. It works for Bernhard. It works beautifully, and it has for such a long time. And yes, he's modified it as he's got a little bit older, but we all have to do that. And we can learn from the true greats like that and apply it to us as we perhaps get a little bit older and want golf to be a bit simpler.